Hey everyone, it's Mr. Wobbly94. I hope you're doing well today. I have another book review here from Brian Keene, who I love quite a bit. Like I've said over and over again on this channel, he's probably my top 3 horror writers of all time, maybe even my top 5 writers of all time, because I love this guy's work. He's a genius with how creative he gets on things. And this book was so surprising to me. It had a weird cover and a weird title, and I really didn't know what to think about it, but I saw that it was only about 100 pages long, so I went ahead and started it on my Kindle. And this one is called An Occurrence in Crazy Bear Valley. Now the cover you probably can't make out. It's kind of blurry with it being stretched for this cover here on my Kindle, but here's kind of a close-up. I'm not going to tell you too much. After you've seen that and you actually begin to hear more about the story in here, you'll probably be able to guess on what these things are supposed to be. But let me tell you, I really enjoyed this. I'm a little disappointed, but I really enjoyed it for the most part. It was a great read. Now, it's really not just one book. It's actually 2 short stories, one that's about, let's say, 80 pages long, and the other one is probably 20, something like that. And first and foremost, we have the story, An Occurrence in Crazy Bear Valley, that is supposedly based on a true story. Apparently, Brian Keene does a lot of research on like urban legends and creature things, cryptology, I think is what it's called, something like that. Zoology? I don't know what it's called. This was a horror story focused around a bunch of bad guys in Western days, because this is basically a cowboy book. The first story, at least, is. Well, both are, but this one mainly. It's kind of a Western book about a group of people. It's like 3 or 4 guys and 1 girl who are wanted, and they leave their towns on the run, and they come out into the woods, and they come across a bunch of lumberjacks who happen to have a cabin nearby. And they kill those guys and go into that cabin, and there happens to be a young woman who's being held captive named Crystal. And apparently in this surrounding area, at nighttime, they begin to hear these horrible noises, but mainly this smell hits them that's very strong, like the smell of corpses, but not really. It's much stronger than that. And they begin to hear this legend from this girl, Crystal, that they found inside of this cabin, who they've kind of adopted into their group now. And she begins to tell them about these things the other lumberjacks who were holding her hostage and attacking her and assaulting her all the time told her about, called the Crazy Bears. And she believes they exist because of the noises, the smells, all of that stuff. And, well, apparently these things are around out in the woods. Well, the Crazy Bears they're a monster that you've heard about, that you know of. And I thought it was such a blast, dude. This thing was such a good read, and the biggest issue that I have is that when it gets closer to the finale, it just kind of ends. Like, you get to the final chapter, segment, whatever you want to call it, this particular story, and it just kind of ends. And I was really let off and bummed with that, because it was really engaging. I had a blast with this. This would be an excellent movie if they would make it. Hollywood needs to go to Brian Keene and take things like The Rising, or The Conqueror Worms, or Dead Sea, or any of his ideas that he has for his novels, and how tightly and well done they are, because there's not a whole lot of fat and grizzle on his books. He actually trims a lot of that out, keeps characters concise. He really does a great job with that. It's one of the big reasons why he's one of my favorite writers of all time, because he doesn't stick to filling out and bloating out his books beyond what they need to be, whether it be a short story, a novel, anything like that. Most of his novels are no longer than 300 pages, and that's great in my opinion. But this is a great example of a story that ends a little too quickly for my taste, but I loved it. I thought it was phenomenal, except for that kind of rushed ending, that last chapter or so. And that story, I really dig. That is the one to pick up this book for, since it makes up the majority of the book. But Brian Keene's writing style, as always, is very good. And now I'll talk about the next story in here, the 20 or 25 page long story that I don't remember the title, but basically it's kind of a Western zombie story that I really loved from the get-go, and it kind of lost me a little bit as it went along, but from the get-go it was really strong and very enjoyable. Basically there was a group of people that are not like outlaws and stuff, it's just kind of some good guys, some bad guys. They have a reverend with them, and I think 1 woman with them too. And they're riding away on their horses from zombies. But this is not your typical zombie thing. Apparently this is the same virus as other books of his that he's talked about in the author's note at the end of this particular book. This is a virus that not only infects, humans, where they become zombies if they get bit or they die. This infects animals, bugs, all of that stuff. And that sounded awesome to me. I had never heard of a zombie story doing that, as far as I can recall. maybe like a rage virus type of thing infecting animals, but I've never heard of zombie animals being in an actual product as far as I remember. I think there was something out there with zombie deer or something, I don't know. But in this example, these guys have to keep riding their horses basically until the horses collapse because they've got to get away from these zombies that never have to sleep, never have to breathe, never have to rest. They're just the undead. They just keep moving all of the time, and it doesn't matter. It can be humans, animals, all of that. That's a big threat, dude. Think of how there's that factoid about you never being more than like 10 feet away from spiders or something like that I had heard back in the day, years ago. And if that's true, you would be screwed. You would be so screwed, it would be next to impossible to survive an apocalypse like that, a zombie virus like that. But they even have like dead birds that are circling around above them, and like their feathers and parts of them are falling off all the time and stuff. That sounds awesome as a concept, just as an image alone for a movie or a TV show or something. How has that not been done before? How has no group of writers in a writer's room come up with that before for like Walking Dead or something? It's beyond me. But as they're trying to get away from these zombies that never have to rest, they have to kind of bide their time on what they can do, and they know the horses are almost done for. Like, they're not going to be able to keep riding these things endlessly because eventually they're going to be down, and even on the horizon they can see hundreds of these zombies, whether it be animals, people, whatever, and they know they're close to doom. They go into kind of a panic mode, and they find this valley that they go into. And the valley has a lot of surprises and some things possibly worse than zombies in it. By the end of this story, it had kind of lost me, but it wasn't bad. You know what I mean? Like, it was interesting, it wasn't rushed like the end of the Occurrence and Crazy Bear Valley story that makes it the majority of this novel collection, whatever you want to call this. But just that story alone, the way it ends, kind of let me down with the Western Zombie Valley thing. And it was good. It was fine for what it was, but the Crazy Bear Valley story is the reason you're reading this book, because of how unique and interesting it was, how well done those characters were in both sets of stories. I thought both were very well realized, but mainly in the Crazy Bear Valley story. Brian Keene has shown me at this point that he is a great short story writer and novella writer. I wish he would do more of this, because I think he would succeed at that as well, matter of fact. But aside from that, I really don't have much more to say about An Occurrence in Crazy Bear Valley. Both of the stories are entertaining, they're good, they're just kind of, they have their own errors, their own issues, their own problems that could be fixed in editing, but Brian Keene is Brian Keene. You either love him or you hate him, but personally, I love his work. I don't think this was a bad book at all. I'm glad I picked it up and read it randomly out of nowhere. I already have too many books I've started recently, but what reader doesn't? This one was quite a treat. For a quick 100-page read, very much a cool blast. It's a cool introduction to Brian Keene too, but I don't think it does the justification to him and to his quality of work as something like The Rising or City of the Dead. But even so, I love Brian Keene. This is a good book, and I'd recommend it to the right person, especially if you are a Brian Keene fan. Even if it has its flaws, Crazy Bear Valley is super memorable. I will always remember that title. I will always remember the things that happen in here because it's so unique in it. By the way, he's a very gory, extreme horror writer, so if you're not into that, you might as well back away, you know? But he does a great job in both stories with maintaining some great characters and all of that, in my opinion. Anyway, if I had to rate An Occurrence in Crazy Bear Valley on a 5-star basis, I would probably give this about a kind of a weak 4 out of 5 stars, but a 4 out of 5 nonetheless, because I think it's a good read for people like me. It might be a good read for you, depending on what your interests and tastes are in horror. But this was awesome. This is one of the first times I've ever read a story like Crazy Bears, Crazy Bear Valley. Crazy Bear sounds like it'd be like a Disney Bear in the Big Blue House spinoff of something. I don't know. But anyway, what did you think about An Occurrence in Crazy Bear Valley? Did you love it? Did you hate it? What do you think about Brian Keene and his books, his body of work? I'd love to hear all that down below, too. I think he's writing fantasy now. I think I looked at Amazon recently and he had fantasy books he's putting out now. Maybe he always has, I don't know, but I always knew him from his horror stuff, not from fantasy, so that kind of threw me off. I might have to try out his horror fantasy stuff at some point. Anyway, love the guy, loved the book for the most part, had some really good stuff in there I would recommend to people. If you guys think this sounds interesting, check it out. 100 pages, it'll fly by, I promise. I read this in like a day and a half because I had to spread it out, I've been busy. Anyway, thank you all for watching, guys. 4 out of 5 stars. God bless you all, catch you later, and goodbye.